speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope with us for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until he is finished. It is my great pleasure this evening to introduce our speaker, Geoff M. Come on up here.
Can you hear me now? Water. This makes me feel like an NFL player. Anyway, I'm Geoff. I'm an alcoholic. And I'd like to thank Greg for greeting me at the door. And I met Reed and John. And ever since I walked in the room, everybody's made me feel very, very welcomed and at home. Some AA meetings are kind of like, for me, exercise. There's some days when I just don't want to get on the treadmill or get on the, I have an elliptical at home because the club closed down. And I know when I'm through working out, I'm really glad I did what I did. I took the discipline and I did what I did. Some days I just don't want to go to AA meetings because I'm too busy or I think I'm too important. And yet when I go, I hear something that I really enjoyed hearing and learned from. And so that just validates get my ass off and get to meetings. My sobriety date is March 11th, 1993. I have a sponsor here in Prescott, and he has a sponsor. Alcoholics has changed and given me back my life. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is I don't have a humorous presentation. Most of my humor and fun comes from after the meeting or when I'm not at meetings. I'm a bit of a scamp, and I love a good laugh, but whenever I share, I notice that, my message is about the severity and the seriousness of this disease. I have lost 3 wonderful, wonderful men who drank themselves to death. And I cried, and I wept, and I mourned for them. And I realized that therefore, by the grace of God, go I, because I love living. I love the life that I have now. So let me take you back to before 1993, what my life was like. I was a functional alcoholic. I taught elementary physical education, and yet I did not start drinking alcoholically until I got married. So, yeah, I find that humorous. And got married for the wrong reasons. I got married out of convenience. We were living together, and I got an ultimatum from Chris, my significant other at the time, and so I decided, yeah, let's go ahead and get married. What do you want? Not down on a knee, nothing romantic. I made her go out and buy her own ring. I handed her $2,000, and I thought that covered my ass. But anyway. So what it was like? So she got to a point where I just can't take your drinking anymore, and left. And I didn't have the stones to divorce her or step up and be a man and say, look, this isn't working for me, or I know it's not working for you. But regardless, the conditions of the divorce were pretty amicable, and so that allowed me the opportunity to drink at will. I was a functional alcoholic. I always made it to work. I found myself on the playground one day thinking about stopping at the liquor store and getting a half pint on the way home. Well, that led to pulling into that same liquor store in Point Loma, out in San Diego, and pretty soon the little Vietnamese lady had my half pint of Jim Beam sitting on the counter before I even got out of the truck. So what did I do? I started going to different liquor stores, and pretty soon each of those had the bottle out. Anyway, the shame of drinking came one day when I was at home, and my next door neighbor, who was a Navy pilot, was a drinking buddy, and it was in the middle of the day, and I had a half-gallon above the stove. It was up nice and high. And I pulled the door open, and I took that half-gallon out, and they had nice big glass handles on them, you know, so you could take pulls on them. Similar to this. And I took a big, strong pull of that Jim Beam, and I put it down, and my neighbor was standing right there in the kitchen door looking at me. He said, do we need to talk? And I said, no. I said, I just wanted to get a little buzz going, you know, because I'm finishing the work around the house. Anyway, you know, that was a shameful moment for me, and that was a moment of clarity when I realized I think I've got a drinking problem. And that's when the sequence of attempts to try to quit drinking started. And I would go 1 or 2 days and could not for the life of me quit drinking. It was just too much a part of my makeup. I didn't drink to get blottoed. I very seldom, well, except for a couple times in Mexico with tequila, I didn't have too many blackouts. It was just getting a buzz on so I didn't have to feel. I didn't have to think about the man I had become because of my behaviors and decisions that I had made. On the outside, I was a great actor. I had everybody convinced that I was a neat guy, that I had it together, that I was honest and upright, and I was none of that. And what revealed that was step 4 right here. My sponsor told me, he said, Geoff, you're only going to get out of this program what you put into it. And if you don't have some kind of a change, a psychic change, or something that makes you different from this experience of going through these steps, you're going to drink again. The unchanged man will drink again. I used to teach smoke enders. It was a smoking cessation program. And after it went out of business, I was at a poker game one night, and I used to smoke, this is just a little side note. I used to smoke Marlboro Lights. That was my best friend. So I quit smoking for 2 or 3 years. We were playing poker. A guy next to me had Marlboro Lights, and I said, hey, can I borrow one? Borrow? No, you can have it. I smoked it, and I was back to a pack and a half within a week. That was the recidivism of my behavior and smoking. So that taught me a valuable lesson about if I'm going to quit drinking, I can't even take that first sip. I cannot take that first drink. And they say that's the one that takes you away. That's the one that will kill you, that first drink. And I honestly believe that. So I continued to drink and finally got to the point where I was cleaning my dad's World War II P-38, Walther P-38. It was a German officer's pistol. I was cleaning it, and I had a full magazine right there, and I put the thing all back together, and I took the magazine, and I thought how easy it would be to shove that in there, rack it, and just end my misery, because I couldn't quit drinking. I could not stop. I drank daily, but I just drank. How was I going to live day to day without alcohol? I was going to have to deal with me, and that's something I had never stepped up and done. I had never been honest with the man in the mirror. Every night I would go to bed, and before we go to bed, we gentlemen usually go to the bathroom and urinate, and so we can get a full night's sleep. And I had a mirror right above my toilet, and I would stand there, and some nights I'd be weaving, and I'd be urinating into the toilet, looking at my image that was looking back at me. My dad said, you can fool everybody, you can fool anybody, but you can't fool the man in the mirror. And I had to sit there and look at myself in the disgust that I had for the man I had become, because of the decisions and my behaviors that were mostly sneaky and cowardly and just despicable because I was not raised that way. I was raised in a middle-class white family. Mom and dad stayed together their whole lives till dad passed away. But they were always trying to teach me principles of how to live a good life. And yet my self-will overrode all those lessons and principles that they had taught me, because I just wanted what I wanted. And if it means stepping on you and stealing and cheating, I did it. To the point where I was ready to kill myself. Well, I had an alternative. I didn't have the stones to shoot myself. So I called. This was, my mom died January 1st, 1993. Oh, speak in the microphone. Sorry, I thought I used my playground voice. Is this better? That's picky, picky, picky. Anyway, can you hear me all right? Is this okay? I called my neighbor 2 doors down, Joe M. He's in Florida. And I said, Joe, I need to talk to you. And he said, I've been waiting for your call. You know, I haven't told this story in quite some time, but when you relive moments that change your life, it all comes back. And I don't mean to feel weak, but he said, I'll be right up. And he came to my house, and he knocked on the door, and I opened it, and he walked in, and I collapsed in his arms crying. I had dropped the rock. I had finally faced up and was willing to do something about my drinking. And I was scared to death. God, I was scared. I lived most of my life in fear that you would find out the kind of man I really was. And to come up and starting to lay my cards out on the table for the first time in my life was, it was the beginning of me growing up, is what it was. I was pretty much an adolescent, both emotionally and spiritually. I'll get into spirituality in just a minute, but I have to tell you, Joe took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was at Porter Hall in San Diego. It was called La Mesa Men's. It was a 2-hour meeting, 2 hours of solid sobriety, of men who would catcall and talk over you sometimes. But if you were serious and you really wanted to get sober and you were sharing your guts and your soul with them, you could hear a pin drop. The first man that came up to me after that meeting was Steve Knight. And I got to see Steve a year or so ago at one of the roundups here in town. And I said, Steve, you probably don't remember me, but you were the first man who came up to me and gave me your phone number and said, young man, if you ever need to take a drink, you call me first. Well, fortunately, I was so destitute and so willing to, I didn't take a drink from March 11th on. Actually, it was March 10th. March 11th was my first full day of sobriety. And I was a poster child for AA. I really was. I did everything I was told. You know, even as a child of the 60s, and we were rebels, and fuck the establishment and don't trust anybody over 30 and all those little cliches that came out of the 60s. I had surrendered. And I had surrendered and said, by God, I said, I'm going to do this. Because this was the first time I was not alone. All those other attempts I had tried to do by myself and my self-will, my self-discipline, nothing could keep me sober. Now that I had a group of men, and I say this sincerely, there was no distractions, there were no skirts there were no women with sobriety, and so my sponsor said, stick with the men's meeting, go to the stag meetings, that's where you're going to get your real sobriety, and if you want it and you're willing to work for it, you can get your life back. So I started working the steps, and I'll tell you what, this step three for me is my foundational step. I had always believed in God. I went to Sunday school. I drank the Kool-Aid they gave me there. And but I never allowed God to work for me or let him work with me. So my sponsor said, step 3 is omnipotent to this program, Geoff. It's a spiritual program. Last thing I wanted to hear. Spiritual, oh shit, God thing. Anyway, he said, I want you to find a place somewhere. You've made this commitment. I came to believe that power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I believe that. He said, I want you to go somewhere and do your 3rd step with just you and your higher power. So I drove out to the end of Point Loma in San Diego, and there's some benches up there above the old lighthouse where you can sit and you can see the Pacific Ocean on your right side and San Diego Bay on your left side. And it's an incredible place to be alone with your higher power. And so I made that commitment to God. I said, God, I'm giving you my life and my will, and I'm turning it over to you, and I just ask for your guidance and your grace, and please direct me to a better way of living. Prior to this, though, my first assignments in AA were pray to God every night to remove the obsession to drink. That, and when I learned the Serenity Prayer, when I felt weak and I thought I might drink, I really did. I said the Serenity Prayer, and I meant it. And I just asked for God's wisdom to know the difference between what I had control over and what I didn't. And most of the stuff I did not. As teachers, we have to have control issues. If we don't, we are usually not very effective as instructors. So it was brought to my attention, especially by my buddies that I went to Baja with. We'd go fishing on trips, and he's, God damn, Geoff, you're always trying to tell everybody what to do and how to set the camp up. And so I got this feedback. Sometimes we're told things we don't really like hearing, but we need to hear. And so anyway, I had to come to grips with my control issues and let go and let God. So, we're moving on now. I've done my 3rd step. I've turned my will and life over to the care of God. Now it was step 4. This is where I sat down with a pen and paper, and my sponsor did not have me do the columns, and there's all different ways of doing the 4th step, I realize. But all he said to me, he said, we're going to make this so simple, Geoff. He said, just make a list of all your secrets, all those things that you're going to take to the grave with you that nobody else knew about. And so that was it. I spent 2 weeks, and I was in a structured step study at that time as well. And we spent 2 weeks on the 4th step. And so my inventory became that about the stealing, the infidelity, the lying, and it was just those behaviors that had led me to the point of wanting to kill myself. And so that became my inventory of character defects. And then, of course, 5 was doing the 5th step with my sponsor, Joe, who lived down the street from me. And he came up and he said, first of all, he said, I don't care to hear stories about each individual thing you did. He said, I want you to share the transgression and then tell me another one. He said, do not hold anything back. He said, this is your first opportunity to really peel that onion back and show how raw your heart and your soul is right now. And that's what I did. I laid out everything I could possibly lay out and think of. From the time I stole money from my mother's purse all the way up to the infidelity against my former wife. After I was through, Joe asked me to get down on my knees with him and pray. And he said a prayer to God, asking God to remove these transgressions and to strip me of the guilt and the shame of the choices I had made growing up. And then he asked that God help me and direct me through the rest of my life, that I might become more pure and be a better man. It was hard for me to look at other men in the eye and be honest and be authentic. And I couldn't do that. Just could not do that. So then after the fifth step, we moved through the sixth and seventh. And that was, I'll kind of encapsulate those into, we identified my character defects. I'm asking God now to remove those character defects from me. I've made a lot, my choices now are much, much better. A lot of those character defects, I still have, there's still some that we're working on, like tolerance, tolerance of asshole drivers and other things that, piss you off. People that don't take their shopping carts back and put them back where they were found. Little things like that. Anyway, I did humbly, and I continue to humbly ask God to remove these shortcomings that I'm still holding on to. And so 8 was the list of persons that I had harmed, and my mother had died, my dad had died. My mother left me with my father had a coin collection that he had inherited from his father, and my mother asked me to liquidate it, take it to a shop. And one of the things I did during my drinking days was I took it to a coin place, and they gave me like $1,300. And so I took $1,000 back to my mom. We got $1,000 for it, Mom. Here you go. Pocketed the $300. So I told my sponsor, I said, my mom's dead. I owe her $300. And she says, well, no, you don't. You just go give $300 each to your brothers and sisters. So I gave $300 to my brother, $300. And I had to tell them that I had cheated our own mother out of $300 for this coin collection. And my brother said, oh, bad mistake, Jeff. My brother's 10 years younger than me, and pure as the driven snow. Asshole. Yeah, he's really a lovely man. We've become much closer since I quit drinking. It's amazing. Most of my relationships have improved greatly. So anyway, my first amends were made to my wife, ex-wife, and I walked over and I called her first and I said, can I come over and talk with you? This is, yeah, come on over, reluctantly. She was still pissed at me. And I told her, I said, I quit drinking and I'm in AA, and she said, hold it right there. She knew exactly where I was going, and she said, take your AA bullshit and get the hell out of my house. And so I took my AA direction, and I left. And first thing I did, I called my sponsor, Joe. And she kicked me out of the house and wouldn't even let me make my amends. And he said, Jeff, this isn't about her. This was about you. This was about you going and keeping your side of the street, getting it cleaned up. Anyway, 2 weeks later, Chris called me and said, Jeff, I want to apologize for the way I treated you. She said that was because I was just coming off, I was angry, and she said, please come back over and let's talk. And so I did, and we've been wonderful friends, better friends than we were husband and wife. She remarried, and wonderful man, met him sober, and I'm just happy for her, just real happy for her. She's a wonderful lady, and I wrote her out of my will, and that when we divorced, and now she's back in it, so don't tell her. Anyway, so I made direct amends. Most of my amends were to close friends. I stole money from when I was working in a liquor store in college, went back, and I probably embezzled about maybe a couple $100 over a 2 or 3 year period, taking $5 or $10 at a time when I was working. And I went back to the liquor store, and the guy that owned it when I was working there had sold it. And I was thinking, oh man, I don't have to make amends. So I told my sponsor, and he said, wait, whoa. He said, you go back to that liquor store, you stole his inventory, and when he sold that store to the new owner, that was inventory that he would have had that you stole. So I had to pay $200 to this guy I had to walk into this liquor store and say, you don't know me, but here's $200 from money that I had stolen from the previous owner. He said, no, you don't have to do that. I said, yes, I do. And I literally pushed the money right in front of him and turned around and walked out. And I can imagine the story. He went home and he said, you'll never guess what happened today. Some guy walks into the store, hands me $200, and turns around and walks out. So that was, that's like the opposite of your bottom, having some, anyway. Where are we at? Step, here we go. This is the one now. This is the one that takes the place of having to do the fourth step over again for me. That's where I have, and I know when I have to deal with somebody, because I have self-talk that goes to very, very dark places sometimes. And the conversations I have with these fictional people, actually they're not fictional, they're people that I had some kind of an altercation, a misunderstanding, a dispute of some kind. And I would have, that asshole, God. Anyway, so this now, on step 10, for me, if I get into that self-talk, I know that I have to pick up the phone and clear the air, or see that person at work the next day and say, Lauren, come on over here a second. I said something that may have been hurtful to you yesterday, and I just want to clear the air and make sure that you and I are on the same page, and if I did say something, I'm terribly sorry, and I did not mean it to hurt or offend you. And 9 times out of 10, when I do that, the people don't have any idea what I'm talking about. They just, it's my perception of, and my sensitivity to how I may have come across to them. And sometimes sarcasm can be really cutting, and I don't think it is. I think I'm being cute and smart, and it comes across very poorly. So in those situations, I have to make good. I have to make good with the person that I offended or I feel I may have hurt. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact. I learned about meditation, what meditation is, sitting for 20 minutes and trying to clear your mind. I find it very difficult to just focus on breathing. It's real boring, and then I find myself going off on these little thought tangents. But anyway, I'm getting better at it. I'm also on 12 now. My primary purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous is for me to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I love working with young men who are trying to get their lives back. I sponsor men, a lot of guys that come from these recovery homes. I've met 2 of them that I'm working with now that from the meetings down at Granite Park. Was it Granite Creek Park, thank you. Granite Creek Park. I met a couple guys from other meetings from the Prescott House, and I love being able to be a part and give back to men that what was so freely given to me. And it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling, and it's part of my inventory at the end of the day. What did I do today for somebody else? And if I worked with a newcomer, if I'm working a kid with doing his steps, it makes me feel good. They said, that's part of my inventory now, where I can say, hey, I did something for somebody else. I would do this during my drinking days, but I would love to get the notoriety, and I would love to get the recognition for what I was doing. Now, part of my anonymity, doing things, random acts of kindness, and not getting any kind of, not even letting anybody know that I did it. See, I can't tell you all the things I did now because that would that would blow that. So what I, simple little things, and trying to make other people's lives a little bit better, and that can be. I belonged to a little chanting group in San Diego, where we would chant as a form of meditation, and at the end of that 1 hour of chanting, it was kind of like the Hare Krishna thing, but it got into all these other things. And you really kind of got into this really nice space. But at the end of the meeting, one of the guys that was playing music was telling me about how easy it is to take this feeling of serenity that we hopefully get, which I believe I have most of the time, and is to share that with others. Somehow share that serenity, share that peace of mind that you have. And it doesn't have to be with family or close friends. It can be with neighbors. It can be with people walking down the street. He said, sometimes something as simple as smiling at somebody can make or break, not make or break their day, but say, that person just recognized me and smiled. I know with teaching, and I learned this early on, is to learn the names of people, learn the names of your students, use their names frequently, and recognize them. Children love to be recognized. I'm realizing I love to be recognized. I got to come here tonight and talk about me. And I don't get the chance to do that very often. But the point I'm trying to make is how easy it is to help somebody else. I see these things on YouTube or Facebook or one of those things where people are paying it forward, doing something for a stranger. My life now is working with the men who are trying to get sober, doing the very best I can, but through it all, I have what I call a working God in my life, a higher power that I can live with and work for and do the types of things that I would believe he would have me do. I pray every morning, and it's probably, some people have a different prayer every morning. I have a pretty routine prayer, and if you don't mind, I'll share it with you because it kind of, I'm not looking to cover bases, and I don't know if God hears my higher power, God hears those prayers, but my prayers are a reminder to me to stay on the course that AA has shown me, and to recognize the people in my life that either I know or don't know, that I would ask that God help them and protect them. So I'm not asking it for me, I'm asking it for them. Almighty God, my Heavenly Father, thank you for this glorious day of life. I pray this morning for knowledge and understanding and awareness of your will for me and the power and the courage to carry that out. Please bless my family, my friends, my dogs, Jack, Charlie, and Molly, the alcoholic and addicts who still suffer, our servicemen and women wherever they are in the world, especially those in harm's way and their families for the sacrifices that they do make. Please, Father, bless my family and friends who may be ill or injured, my sister Leslie, my friends John, Don, Paul, Charlie, and Knox. I pray this morning that you would help and protect those who are infected by the coronavirus, and also those who are in the medical field who are working so diligently to keep us safe and healthy. And finally, Lord, I ask that you make me a better man today, to be more kind, more caring, more giving and sharing, more patient and tolerant, but above all, more loving to those I come in contact with. Thy will, Lord, not mine, be done. God is love, love is God. Amen. And that's my prayer each morning, and I I was at a point in time in my sobriety at 10 years where I would call myself being in the AA doldrums, where I was going to meetings and that's about it. I was not doing service work. I was not reading from the big book. I was not doing anything. I was going to the meetings, and I told my sponsor, I said, Ronnie, I have a new sponsor now, shoe cobbler in San Diego, wise beyond his means. This was before I came to Prescott. He asked me a simple question. He said, Geoff, are you praying? No, he said, well, you know, this is a spiritual program. You might want to consider getting down and asking God for his grace and forgiveness and for not praying. And so that led me to go back and do the steps again. And at 10 years sober, I went back and got into a structured step study again and went through. And this time, I approached it more from a spiritual standpoint rather than drinking and amends and character defects. But I came to step 3 early on, and I really, really recommitted myself to my higher power that I choose to call God. And so that, I'm not a religious person, but I pray every day to a power greater than myself. And what I loved about Alcoholics Anonymous early on was they gave me the option. Nobody said you have to believe in God. They gave me the option to find a power greater than myself that I could work with. And that's what I did. I chose to go back to a God that I always believed in and saying to him, this time, God, this time I'm really going to be better. I'm going to be working, trying to do your will, or what I perceive to be your will. It's an amazing thing how easily we can take back our will and start doing those things if we don't stay the course. And whenever I feel like I'm wandering off that line, that course that AA has set out for me, I know I need to call my sponsor. I don't call him often, but I know that he's there, and I know when I call and talk with Scottish John, if any of you know Scottish John. John has pearls of wisdom and clarity for me for whatever situation I have. And he said, sometimes when I'll call, he says, it's been a while, Geoff, how you been? So we would do small talk, and then I'd get into some of the other things that the COVID-19 has created, and a lot of that is isolation from people. I'm a hugger. I've always been a hugger. I love being around people. I love the fact that you're here tonight. I tried doing that Zoom shit, and it didn't work for me. And to hear, 15 or 20 people try and say the Serenity Prayer at the same time on a Zoom meeting, it's hilarious. But anyway, I love my life. I love what AA has given me. If you're new, and I'd like to welcome those people who identified themselves as newcomers. It's a program of attraction rather than promotion, but I tell you what, I promote the hell out of this to my sponsees. I really do. I said, if you want what I have and you're willing to do the work, you can have your life back. You can have that peace and serenity. You can have that relationship that you lost with your wife or your family or your children. You can have that back. And I have wept openly in AA meetings when somebody gets up and says, I'm going to be with my son again. My son has taken me back. The son that told me he never wanted to see me again. And to get that back, it's like a reunion when you see these films or these videos of kids. Their fathers and mothers are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and it softens my heart. And when men get up and women get up and say they're getting their children back or they have custody of their kids again, it's just one of the most beautiful things. And I owe that, and not me, but I attribute that to Alcoholics Anonymous. and the beauty of this program and how it works. You know, I heard somebody say today, it was just tonight, how does it work? I think it was Steve said that. Was that Steve? How does it work? Well, my sponsor says fine. Anyway, and Steve, when you got up here and read that tonight, I love hearing how it works, because that's how it does work. And every now and then you'll run into people that are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, and you can kind of, they're the, I don't know, the habitual, I'm taking inventories now, and that's not appropriate, but there are some people that I've said that to. Perhaps you're constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourselves, and you know, that kind of, it's like sticking a knife in their heart and telling them they're losers. Great way to end the talk, isn't it? Anyway, I have a mirror right above my toilet now. Same mirror. Brought it with me from San Diego. I stand in front of that mirror now, and I can look at myself in that mirror and like the man that I've become because of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I did what I was told, and I had that psychic change. One quick thing on a spiritual note, I came home from work one day, I just recalled this, because it's something that I know happened to me. And when you tell an audience something that happened to you and they say, yeah, but this is what happened. I had a guest room, as I come in the front door of my house, I had a guest room on the left-hand side, and I was so tired coming in, I was just exhausted, hadn't been drinking, this is about 90 days sober, laid down on the bed, and I was laying there on my back, arms at my side, eyes closed, and I literally felt this energy kind of come in through the top of my head and went, and I got this feeling and this sense, and it was like, I felt it was like God saying to me, Geoff, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And it happened to me. It didn't happen to you, but it happened to me, and I know it, and I believe it was the Holy Spirit, or call it what you want. But it was a beginning of some real, sincere connection. But, you know, it's interesting that the self-will took me away to that point where I was getting that 10 years of in the doldrums because I wasn't active. I'm active now. I'm actively seeking God, and I'm actively seeking to do what I believe is His will. I look in that mirror now, and I've become the man I always wanted to become. I've become the man that my parents would be proud of today. I would have a much better relationship with them, of course. But it's a wonderful thing to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and like the person that you have become. And that's something that only AA has been able to give me. No amount of therapy or anything else. But I tell my sponsees, self-esteem will come not from others raving on you or granting you whatever they are throwing at you. Self-esteem and self-worth comes from repeated experience. No, it's repeated successful experiences. And I tell them, every day that you are sober is a successful experience, and it adds to your feelings of worth and your self-esteem, and I hope that helps them. Anyway, we're pretty close to the 8 o'clock. I want to thank you very much for listening. I don't really ever talk this long, but I hope something rang a bell for you tonight, and I just want to thank AA and Mike for having me here tonight, and I'm just very, very grateful, and this is one way that I've been responsible, hopefully. And thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Let's thank Geoff again. Let's give him another hand. Outstanding.